Greetings Duelists and welcome to another video. So with the release of Duelist Nexus right around the corner, I figured I'd show one specific duel that is probably going to translate to stuff that's going to happen in the TCG. It's basically the top 8 of the Duelist Cup. For those who don't know, the Duelist Cup is pretty much like the equivalent of the North American WCQ, but for the Asia region. So right now we're at top 8. Is currently Lin Yung Jung versus Huang Xin. Lin Yu is on Purrely and Huang Xin is on Rescue Ace. So as you guys already know, these two decks are going to receive a lot of support. Well, not a lot of support, it's just like 2 cards for each archetype, but are 2 very significant cards in Duelist Nexus. So in order for us to learn properly how to prepare, this duel is a very good example of stuff that you need to look out for when facing these strategies in the TCG. The first example that we're seeing right here is this one. So the monster that just been summoned is called Purrely Noir. Purrely Noir is a rank 2 monster that can be summoned by tagging Sleepy Memory into like the Purrely monsters. And what this card does is that essentially the same way as all the other Purrelys, it can attach a material from whatever you activate. However, this one specifically can set trap cards from the deck. That is a very big deal. That means that not only are you getting an extra material, but you're getting access to Purrely Yeep or Purrely Shirley, which is another trap that we're getting in Duelist Nexus. And Purrely Yeep means that you now have access to X Purrely Noir with at least 4 materials, and you can get 2 draws out of it on your opponent's turn if this properly resolves. So we're going to see that strategy in action. He activates the Pretty Memory, he attaches it, and he's setting the Purrely Yeep as I brought up earlier. He's taking life because of my friend Purrely. But yeah, now he's doing Purrely's effect. Take note, in the OCG, Delicious Memory is at 3, so this deck is a lot more powerful in the OCG than here in the TCG. However, that doesn't mean that you should not be properly preparing for it, because once this arrives in the in the TCG, you're probably going to see stuff very similar to what's happening right now. So like he drew out of Sleepy Memory, and then he tagged it out, and now he drew into Sleepy Memory again. So now that Noir is 2 interruptions, and Lin drew 2 cards. That is really strong. It also means that now Purrely can actually play going first instead of just playing going second. So Huang Xin is contesting with Prosperity. I'm going to freeze the video right here. Out of the 6 cards you already seen, if you saw my previous Rescue Ace video, you should be familiar with all of them except for the spell card. The spell cards being shown is a quick play spell called Emergency. Emergency, what it does is that it can summon a Rescue Ace monster from your deck, and then immediately after you resolve that, you tribute a monster, a Rescue Ace monster. Looking at his hand, he has no monsters in his hand, which kind of tells you that the safe bet is that he'll probably grab the Impulse. Impulse is very important in this matchup, because the way Impulse works is that whatever monster he targets to freeze its effect is affecting the player and not the monster, which means it can deal with the Noir. So I'm just gonna keep playing the duel. Lin is contemplating, Huang is contemplating on options. He has a second prosperity in hand. This hand is really not that good. So he grabs the impulse. He summons impulse. Impulse makes it so Lin immediately has to contest to it immediately. So Lin flipped up Infinite Impermanence. This is a very, very important tip to anybody watching this. If you are under this situation, Imperm is the best play because it makes it so Huang cannot tag out the impulse if he tries to contest it with a monster interruption. I think this is pretty much the end of the duel because there's nothing else Huang can do. And now we're going into game 2. Huang is going to be going first. So now, since there are no many interruptions, we can see what Huang can do with this Rescue Ace strategy. He opens Rhoda. Rhoda searches Airlifter, and that's a very big deal because Airlifter is going to search a spell, which means it can search for Emergency, and Emergency is going to search him for like another Rescue Ace monster. Huang is contemplating whether or not he grabs Emergency. That kind of telegraphs you that he already has Emergency in hand. He still opts for grabbing Emergency. Lin immediately chains Maxi. Huang is contemplating what is going to be his summon for choice, and this is why Rescue Ace is very powerful in the OCG. Basically, you have a 1-card boss monster that can set your cards, and you're not giving your opponent many cards with Maxi. Sadly, it got interrupted by Imperm, but take note, Lin already used 2 of his cards, and Huang. So Huang has Impulse in hand, which is very, very important. That's going to make it so he summons Fire Attacker. So I guess I'll explain this interaction. Whenever your opponent activates a monster effect that has the ability to search for cards, that could be Purrely, Kashtira Fenrir, Ariana of the Labyrinth Servant, or the Striker Dragon, just to name like a few notable ones, like the Rika monsters, for example. Tributing Impulse specifically for Fire Attacker is important because what Fire Attacker does is that it will make it so Huang can draw 2 cards and discard 1 as soon as Lin ends up adding from Purrely. So that's what we're going to see right here. He grabs the Purrely, and because he grabbed Purrely, now Huang is going to draw 2 cards. And that's really important because, as you can see, he drew into Maxi. He also drew into another Impulse. Lin activates my friend Purrely, pays 5. Huang immediately contests with Maxi. Lin is immediately chaining Delicious Memory. If you're playing Purrely, you pretty much are forced to do this if you get Maxied. Otherwise, you're just giving your opponent card advantage for no reason. Now I understand he was chaining the Maxi to the Purrely, trying to tag itself in. He tagged into Happiness. Now Lin is contemplating on his place. He grabs you Purrely Street. Purrely Street is very very important here because it pretty much makes it so Huan Qin has to like play his cards preemptively. Otherwise, he cannot target any of their Lin's monsters. So now Lin is contemplating on his options. He's doing my friend Purrely now. Huang immediately contests with Ash Blossom. Now Lin pretty much has to bank on the Purrely Street resolving with happiness, or it's pretty much either happiness or pure lily. The preventer cannot stop both, so pretty much Lin is contemplating on what route Huang is going to go for. They're thinking very very hard and thoroughly here. And he attacks, the preventer sets, he draws one card, the plump is summoned. Plump will make it so he grabs the 2 copies of emergency. That's pretty much very important because emergency does have a graveyard effect. Lin is now contemplating other plays. He's going to do the happy memory. He's mainly doing this just so he can give the plump more materials. He tried to go for Zeus, but he will be reminded that the Zeus cannot summon because the happiness didn't properly battled. I'm kind of surprised that Lin did not activate the Purrely Street before going into battle phase. That would have made it so Huang couldn't target the happiness, immediately had to do preventer. But that being said, it resolved. The Noir currently has 5 materials, and now the Noir is going to draw a card because it does have Sleepy Memory under it. Huan Qin drew into Airlifter. Something very important to note is Huang drew into 3 of his rescue spell and traps, which means if he opts to go for Turbulence, it won't be as effective. He's activating Airlifter now. Airlifter is going to grab him the 3rd copy of Emergency. So now the game plan is trying to contest to this Noir that has 5 materials. As you will see very very soon, it's not going to be very very hard because they do have Impulse and Rotation, and he had Rescue. So basically Rescue is making it so he can target the Impulse to summon it from grave. Lin has 2 options. Either he lets it go through and he pretty much puts Huang on better have the all out for the Noir, or he immediately contested with the Noir. Take note that once Huang summons the Impulse, the Noir is not going to be as effective anymore because the Impulse can target the Noir, and since it affects the player, the Noir would not be able to activate its effect if the impulse resolves. However, if he changed the Noir and the impulse is on the board, the impulse is going to summon another rescue ace. So that is very, very important. And Lin realizes this. So his best option is pretty much spinning this at the bottom of the deck. Let's see what Lin ends up doing. They're contemplating on their plays. Lin is thinking very, very hard on this because he does not know what other cards Huang has on his hand and board. He knows that if he doesn't make the right move, he could get OTK'd. But pretty much those are the two options that he has. There are no real other options besides those two. So Lin immediately does the Noir play. He detaches the two memories. Huang immediately changed Preventer, and that makes it so he has to do Noir again, otherwise it's going to be set. And Huang just changed Emergency, tributing that turbulence that was being contested to summon the Hydrant. And this is what I meant about like Huang having nothing to worry about. If it's just one copy of Noir under the game conditions and circumstances that he's in, Impulse is just too strong to resolve. It just generates a lot of card advantage, and if you're the Purrely player, you're pretty much forced to like contest against it. So now he pretty much dealt with the Noir. The Noir no longer has materials to spin, and it's pretty much affected by everything. Huang grabs the Turbulence. Take note that I mentioned earlier that Huang already opened a couple of rescue aces in his hand, so this Turbulence is only going to be able to set Alert and Reinforce. If I am a guessing man, I think this duel is pretty much over, even though the Turbulence was not super effective. He immediately grabs Alert. Alert grabs Preventer, and now you're going to see Rescue Ace just amassing card advantage. So before this video, before I keep playing this turn, do you think Huang can OTK? Yes or no? You have 5 seconds. I'm going to let this play out. I have not seen the rest of this turn, but I already see the line. I already know that he has game. Let's see what Huang ends up doing. Huang is reminding Lin that the Preventer resolved, so it is properly set. He links away the Hydrant into Lingeribo. He links away the two other monsters into Nightmare Phoenix. That makes it so he can pop the Street. He draws one card. He discarded Contain, which is no longer usable. He's now doing Headquarters. Headquarters makes it so he can recover some of his cards. Now he links those two away into Unicorn. Unicorn will probably dump the other trap. Yep. That's probably going to spin either the Noir or the other set. Oh, it sends back there my friend Purrely. He's pretty much trying to play it safe. Now he's going for Preventer. Preventer is going to banish the Turbulence, and that's very, very big because now he will make access code. And the Preventer is going to make it so he can summon back the Turbulence, and your opponent cannot contest to it because he's chain blocked by the access code. He pops those two, and that's game. So yeah, That kind of tells you that Rescue Ace can OTK if they have the right setup. Don't underestimate this deck at all. Like, once Duelist Nexus comes out, I think this deck is just going to be very, very strong. So now we're at game 3. Lin activates my friend Purrely. That will make it so he grabs 3 Sleeping Memories. That pretty much tells you that he's opting for the Purrely and R-Ace play. That immediately gets contested withdrawal. Lin activates triple talents. The cards in hand are Veiler, Turbulence, Emergency, and Droplets. The emergency is pretty much sent back to the deck. If you know me and you know this channel, you already know I'm not a huge fan of hand traps because of how powerful and game deciding triple tactic talents can be turn 1. However, Rescue Ace is a deck that plays with very minimalistic engines, and Droll is just too much of a powerful card to not be played. So he summons Airlifter. Lin knows the rest of his hand. He knows that he has Droplets, so he's immediately shotgunning the Purrely effects. And the reason he's doing this is because he knows that if he doesn't do that, Huang would just start getting more and more card advantage, and that's going to be very important for his Forbidden Droplets for resolving. And Lin just wants to make sure that he has a play for next turn. Also, the other thing that Lin is doing is making sure that whatever he draws out of Brow can be something that can interrupt Huang and Qin. He immediately contests the emergency with Ash Blossom. Do we know if Lin drew it out of the Brow? We don't know, but you can make a pretty safe bet that Lin did this entire play to make sure that whatever he can draw could be another interruption for emergency. Now Huang Qin is chaining, is activating Droplets, making sure that the Lily doesn't resolve, and he has 2 Rescue Aces in the graveyard, so now he can summon Turbulence, and Turbulence can make it so he summons, he can grab 4 Spell and Traps. And this is what I meant about like Rescue Ace being like playing with very minimal cards. Like, you don't really need a lot for this card to resolve, and if it resolves, like, you're setting 4 cards. That is just way too much card advantage. One of the cards he set was Emergency, and Emergency is going to grab him more follow-up as well as more interruptions. Now check this out. This is pretty much a very strong play because the emergency is going to summon the Preventer, and it's going to tribute that same Preventer. The reason he's doing that is because the Preventer is going to make it so he summons Airlifter. The Airlifter will grab him another copy of Emergency for next turn. It's either going to be Emergency or like Rescue or Alert. It grabs him Alert, and now he's probably going to wait on his opponent. Either that, or he's going to activate the Rescue to bring back the Preventer. We're seeing Lin still been playing. Yep, he changed the rescue. He activates the Rescue, and the Rescue summons the Preventer. Can we just mention something very important? everything Huan Xin has on the board was with just one turbulence resolving. We're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're talking about a +6 that just got resolved. And Hydrant was not involved. If Hydrant was involved, it would have been even more card advantage. So yeah, that kind of shows you how strong Rescue Ace can be if it's uncontested. Like, yeah. Lin Yu activates the Purely Street. This is very, very strong. This means that Huan Xin's interruptions are going to be shut down. Something very, very important for Rescue Ace players or players that are playing against Rescue Ace. Take note, Rescue Ace cannot deal with cards that prevent targeting. Stuff like the Purely Street, stuff like Mud Dragon of the Swamp, stuff like Lady Labyrinth being summoned with set cards. Those are all really powerful stuff for Rescue Ace. So that's a very, very important tip for anybody playing whenever you're going to deal with these decks. Depending on what's in Lin's hand, I think this game is already decided. There's still 50 minutes on the game, but I think the writing's on the wall. I think Lin already won this game, and and I'll explain why. The reason that that's the case is because we already know everything that is in Huang's hand and board, and the Purely Street makes it so he cannot prevent anything Ling does moving forward. If you already seen Purely in action, you already know that Purely is really strong if the happiness resolves. And yeah, I'm gonna let this duel play out, but like I already see this duel and I already see the writing on the wall. Like, it's already over. But yeah, like, these two are going to be very, very strong decks once Duelist Nexus is revealed. I think that this video was very, very informative, just seeing like what's going to happen with these decks and what should you do if you're facing these decks with whatever you're playing as your strategy. I don't think Duelist Nexus is going to power creep the game. However, I do think that these decks should not be ignored, and they're just going to be part of our meta game. But yeah, Lin is going to take a bit, but pretty much we already know what's gonna happen. So he grabs Delicious Memory. That pretty much already tells you that Happy Memory is in rotation. The Purely was set last turn, so he's flipping it. So Lin is asking whether or not he can tag the Purely. Here in the TCG, you're not allowed to ask the coach. I mean, you're not allowed to ask the judge whether he can do a play. You pretty much have to make the play itself, and the judge will tell you if it's legal. Huang is asking if the Purely can be tagged out. Pop quiz. If you're a Purely player or don't know what Purely does, you have a couple of seconds to guess whether or not that is correct or incorrect. The answer to that might decide this duel. although not really, because he already has Delicious Memory, which was probably going to just summon another Purrely, which is going to make it so he can contest the board. Do you got your answers ready? I'm going to wait until they interact and that will be your answer. Juan Shin immediately changed the extinguish, which kind of tells you that yes, the answer is correct. Lin is allowed to tag the Purrely even though it activated its effect earlier this turn. Take note, Purrely's effects are not hard ones per turn. So the ruling is, even though the game recognizes you try to activate it, when you flip it face up from being face down, it's treated as a new copy of Purrely, so it can try to activate its effects to tag again. So Juan Shin is pretty much forced to activate the extinguish, because if he does not, it's going to end up being summoning something that is untargetable because of the Purrely street. He summons Pure Lily summons, grabs the Purrely Yeep, he tags into Happy, and now Lin is just going to break the board. Pretty much what I brought up earlier. If you are a Purrely player, or if you faced Purrely enough times, you already know what's gonna happen. He's pretty much just going to attack all the monsters. He's going to keep equipping memories into it. The Delicious Memory is making it so it gains more and more attacks. Lin won't be able to OTK Wang this turn. However, he will be able to make it so Huang has to deal with Noir with a lot of materials with very minimal cards in hand. It's true that Huang does have follow-up for his Rescue Ace plays, but I don't think that's going to be enough. I think the amount of card advantage that Lin is going to receive is just going to be very, very strong. And take note, the Purrely street is just going to make it so whatever he summons out of Purrely Yeep is going to be untargeted, so Huang cannot even contest it with Impulse. So he grabbed another Happy Memory. He already used 2 of them. He's using the 3rd Happy Memory. That's going to give it a 3rd extra attack. He attacks the Airlifter a 2nd time, making it so he can grab like a 4th card. He's going to grab Sleepy Memory. Nope, he grabbed Delicious Memory instead. He activates Pretty Memory. Pretty Memory is going to make it so he summons Purrely, most likely. He's discarding the Purrely Yeep. That already tells you that he's aiming for a double Noir play. So basically what's going to happen is he'll reveal the Delicious Memory with the Purrely. That will turn it into Plump. Plump will grab 2 materials. One of them being Sleepy Memory. And now they're in the end phase. He's going to use Purity Memory to attach the last monster. And now he has to contest with Double Noir. And he's going to make it so he can draw out of each of them. Yeah, like, as I said, this game is pretty much over. Like, we're staring at Double Noir, and both of them has a bunch of materials, and even if they can be targeted by Impulse, Impulse can only handle 1 monster, And we already know the rest of Huang's hand. So yeah, that is the rest of the duel. Very lengthy video, but I feel like this video was very important if you want to know how to be prepared for Duelist Nexus. I hope you found this informative. Stay tuned for more videos coming soon. Keep practicing and keep dueling.